Evergreen Sermons Online in Pastor Michael Gabbert's series, Easter, Seen and Unseen. This message from April 12, 2020, Easter Sunday, is entitled The Unexpected Dawn, citing John chapter 20, verses 10 through 18.
Good morning, Evergreen.
Good morning, Evergreen.
Good morning, Evergreen.
Thanks for worshiping with us.
Let's remember what Easter is all about.
Jesus Christ lived a perfect life,
but was then crucified on a cross.
For your sins and for mine.
For your sins and for mine.
For your sins and for mine.
And he was placed in a tomb.
But 3 days later,
ground began to shake.
The stone was rolled away from the tomb.
he was not there.
He is risen!
He's risen!
He is risen. So let's celebrate that as we worship together.
Well, good morning, Evergreen. It's Easter, and I know it feels weird that we're apart right now, but the truth of Easter does not change. Jesus is risen, so let's worship our risen Savior this morning. Sing, I raise a hallelujah. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise, and death is defeated. The King is alive. Oh yes, he is. I raise a hallelujah with everything inside of me. I raise a hallelujah, and I will watch the darkness flee. I raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. I raise a hallelujah. And fear, you've lost your hold on me. Sing it out, church. Oh, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar up from the ashes. Hope will arise. Oh, death is defeated. Our King is alive. Oh, yes, he is. Come on, church, lift your voice. Sing a little louder. Oh, sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Oh, sing a little louder. Oh, sing a little louder. Sing a little louder in the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Oh, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. God. We lift our hallelujah up to you. Sing, who breaks the power of sin and darkness? The King of glory does. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Sing it out, church. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Sing it out, church. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. Yes, you would lay down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Sing worthy, and worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place. That you would bear my cross. Yes, you would lay down your life. That I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Yeah, yeah. Amen. Let's give him praise this morning. Thank you, God. You guys can have a seat in your homes.
Early in the morning, Mary Magdalene walked sadly towards a hill outside Jerusalem.
3 days before
her friend Jesus died and was buried.
Mary is walking to the tomb where they put Jesus' body.
When she arrived, the large stone that had been placed in front of the tomb was gone. She looked inside, but it was empty.
Jesus was not there. Mary was very upset. She ran back to find Peter and John and the other disciples. Seeing Peter and John, she cried,
They have taken Jesus out, and I don't know where they have put him. Peter and John ran ahead to the tomb.
Mary was right. Jesus was gone.
Peter, John, and the others walked home sadly, but Mary stayed behind.
She stooped down and looked inside the tomb again and began to cry. Then Mary saw 2 angels sitting in the tomb. They said to her,
Why are you crying?
Mary replied, Someone took Jesus away and I don't know where he is.
Mary turned around and saw a man. She thought it was the gardener. He asked her who she was looking for. She told him,
Jesus. Then the man called her by name,
Mary.
Suddenly, Mary recognized it was Jesus. Jesus was alive.
Mary, go and tell the others that I am alive. Mary ran home to find Peter, John, and the other disciples to tell Jesus was alive.
What a wonderful, happy day!
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good morning, Evergreen, is what we'll say together.
Oh, sorry.
We love you guys. We're glad. Good morning, Evergreen. Let's gotta do that again. Hey, don't touch that.
No touching.
Stop.
Look at me, see me say, no.
Hi. Good morning, Evergreen. I'm Pastor AJ. We're the Gonzalez family, and we wanted to come from our home into your home to give you the announcements this morning. First, let us say our month's memory verse together. Psalm 119:37. Turn my eyes from looking at what is worthless. Give me life in your ways. Psalm 119:37. Church, don't forget that there are multiple easy ways for you to be able to give. You can give through our app, you can give through our website, and you can give to the phone number that's listed inside of the digital bulletin. Also, church, don't forget that our staff is here for you. Anything that you might need, feel free to email us, call the office during church hours, or anything that you need, we are here for you. Church, we love you. We're glad you're with us this morning for Easter Sunday. Let's stand and let's worship together.
Well, let's stand back up together in your homes and let's sing this together. I will wait for you. Out of the depths I cry to you. In darkest places I will call. Incline your ear to me anew and hear my cry for mercy, Lord. Were you to count my sinful ways, how could I come before your throne? Yet full forgiveness meets my gaze. I stand redeemed by grace alone. I will wait for you, I will wait for you. On your word I will rely, and I will wait for you, surely wait for you, till my soul is satisfied. God alone. Take courage in His power to save, completely and forever one, by Christ emerging from the grave. I will wait for you, I will wait for you on your word. I will rely, and I will wait for you, surely wait for you, till my soul is satisfied. Yes, oh God. Now He has come to make a way, and God Himself has paid the price, that all who trust in Him today find healing in His sacrifice. That all who trust in Him today find healing in His sacrifice. I will wait for you, I will wait for you through the storm and through the night. And I will wait for you, surely wait for you, for your love is my delight. And I will wait for you, I will wait for you through the storm and through the night. Oh, I will wait for you, surely wait for you, for your love is my delight. And I will wait for you, I will wait for you through the storm and through the night. And I will wait for you, surely wait for you, for your love is my delight. Oh, yes, we wait for you. I will wait for you through the storm and through the night. And I will wait for you, surely wait for you, for your love is my delight. Sing, I want to be close. I want to be close, close to your side. So heaven is real and death is a lie. I want to hear voices of angels above, singing as one. You sing it, church. Hallelujah. Great I am, and who is worthy? None beside thee. God Almighty, the great I am. I want to be near to your heart, loving the world, hating dark. I wanna see dry bones living again, singing as one. Come on, church. Hallelujah. And holy, holy, God Almighty, the great I am, and who is worthy? None beside thee. God Almighty, the great I am. You're the great I am. Yeah, yeah. Oh, the great I am. You're the great I am. Sing the mountains shake. The mountains shake before you. The demons run and flee at the mention of your name, King of majesty. There is no power in hell or any who can stand before the power and the presence of the great I am, the great I am, the great I am. Run and flee at the mention of your name, King of majesty. There is no power in hell or any who can stand before the power and the presence of the great I am. You're the great I am. Oh, the great I am. The great I am, the great I am, the great I am, yeah, and hallelujah, and holy, holy, God Almighty, the great I am, and who is worthy? None beside thee. God Almighty, the great I am. You're the great I am. Oh, the great I am. You're the great I am. Sing hallelujah. And hallelujah. And holy, holy, God Almighty, the great I am, and who is worthy? None beside thee, God Almighty, the great I am. Sing, I cast my mind. I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds His hands, His feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid Him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. Oh, come on, church. Then on the third, then on the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ our King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. He shall return. He shall return in robes of white. The blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. What a day that will be, church. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Sing it out. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. Sing that again. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise His name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. Oh Lord our God. Amen. Give Him praise this morning. Amen. You guys can have a seat in your homes.
Christ is risen from the dead. Darkness can no longer reign.
Then the disciples went home again, but Mary stood outside facing the tomb, crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet where Jesus' body had been lying.
They said to her, "Why are you crying?" "Because they've taken away my Lord, She told them, "I don't know where they've put him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. The woman, she did not know it was Jesus. "Woman," Jesus said to her, "why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?" Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I'll take him away."
John 20:16-18. Jesus said, "Mary." Turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus told her, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord!" And she told them what he had said to her.
My life was frustrating. I sat back and watched my mom live her faith out, and I would wonder, why is my life so frustrating? I mean, look at her. She has such peace in her life, and she has nothing as far as the world's concerned. She had nothing. Her $1 a month to John 3:16 mission, and because that's all she had, but that's what she did. And it just frustrated me. I believed in God. That was never a problem for me. I believed in heaven, believed in hell. That was never an issue. My issue was, why won't God give me peace? I would want him to meet me where I was at, but on my terms. Like, I want to continue doing the things I'm doing. You stay on your half and I'll stay on my half, and we'll just kind of have a middle. And that's where I was. I was on the fence, or trying to be on the fence. My mom had to move on a Saturday, and it just happened to be a Saturday where Evergreen men were having a prayer breakfast at Ziggy's. So 10 Evergreen men and 5 pickups showed up to help me move my mom. There was one guy in there named Ray Santiago who confronted me about church. And through that experience that Saturday, it caused me to load the wife and kids up and come to Evergreen. And that was the first time that I ever experienced God. Went to Joe Fear's Sunday school class, and Joe said, "Turn to Psalm 51. And I heard Psalm 52. "Why do you boast of evil, you mighty man? You boast all day long. You're a disgrace in the eyes of God. You love evil rather than good. Your tongue's like a sharpened razor, plus deceit. Surely God will rip you into everlasting ruin." First time in my life I ever read the Bible that I understood what it was saying. I was a piece of junk, and I needed a savior. About a month later, Evergreen 101 was during the service. Ran out to the parking lot to smoke a cigarette. I was a heavy smoker back then. I had to leave. I just couldn't be there anymore. I was under so much conviction, and I went to get in my car, and God spoke to me. "This is your last chance. If you even start that car, I'm done with you. Get back in there and get right with me." And so I ran back into that school. So I waited till everybody left. I got to talk to this dude. It was Mike Hoyt. I shut the door. He probably thought I was crazy because I'm hysterical inside. And I looked at him and said, "All right, preacher, how do you know you're saved? If I pull a gun out and shoot you dead right now, how do you know you're going to heaven? I've said the prayer. It means nothing." He didn't tell me anything I hadn't heard 100 times. The part that made the difference was Romans 10:9-10. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That day, I gave my heart to God, and he saved me. And God came and picked me up, and he held me. That's it. He's the answer to every issue in your life. I can't pay my bills. I can't find a job. I can't get along with my kids. I can't get along with my wife. The neighbor's driving me crazy. Jesus is the answer. It's real simple. If God is real, would you like to know him? If the living God is real, would you like to know him?
Happy Easter, Evergreen. He is risen. He's risen indeed. I woke up this morning a little less than I would expect on an Easter Sunday morning. I was a little saddened by the prospect of one more sermon in front of a single camera, an empty room. And I just spent a few minutes thinking about that first Easter. Those disciples were isolated, they were hidden, they were afraid, cut off from everybody they loved, everybody that meant anything to them. Only they had no idea how that day was going to unfold. You see, I've been a little perturbed that the virus decided to break out in the springtime. I knew we were going to miss Easter together. This is our fourth Sunday by live stream. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sick of it by now. And yet, the Lord just reminded me that the timing is in his hands, and Easter is the day with a message best suited for the circumstance where we find ourselves right now. I was reminded this morning there are more people that will hear the good news of the resurrection today online than any other Easter Sunday in history. If we have to do our part and be separate, it's okay. Because God reminded me that he's going to do his part, and that is on Easter Sunday morning, he's going to meet with his children wherever they happen to be. So, now that I've kind of got my head screwed on straight, let's look at the text and see what God has for us on Easter Sunday morning. Open your Bibles to John chapter 20. Our children have already read this passage for you, and all of the added elements that we had today just are so wonderful. It makes this such a special service. But let's read these verses beginning in verse 10 of John chapter 20. The disciples went home again. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. That's a connection to the previous paragraph. John and Peter find out that the tomb is empty, and they race to check it out. John gets there first. Peter sort of catches up, but being Peter, he bursts on in. John had paused at the door. Peter goes in. They see that the tomb is empty. It tells us in the text of this chapter that John thought something was up, but he wasn't confident enough to say anything yet. And so walking back to where they were meeting together, it says the disciples left. But then verse 11, but Mary. Oh, by the way, if you've been reading the readings that I gave you for this Holy Week, what you find is that Matthew tells us that on the day that the body was put into the tomb, the stone was rolled away and closed. It says that Mary stayed and sat there staring at the tomb. She was the last one on that Friday to walk away when it finally got dark enough that the Sabbath was about to begin and she had to return to her home. She was the last one there, and here we find her determined to stay again on Sunday morning. Mary stood outside facing the tomb crying. As she was crying, she stooped to look into the tomb. She saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet where Jesus' body had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "Because they've taken away my Lord," she told them, "and I don't know where they've put him." And having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, though she did not know it was Jesus. "Woman," Jesus said to her, "why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?" Supposing he was the gardener, she replied, "Sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said, "Mary." And turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus told her, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them what he said to her. Man, this is one of the more overlooked accounts of what happened that morning. But I want us to examine this. Mary Magdalene is the character that we see focused on here. She was not a particularly important person as all things were considered. In her day and time, she was a woman, for one thing. She doesn't appear to have been married. She had no social status whatsoever. And yet, the last one at the tomb on Friday and one of the first ones at the tomb on Sunday. So it's appropriate that we get this account of what happened to her. We see this business with the disciples returning after finding the empty tomb. They're still experiencing, even though the sun has come up that Easter morning, they're still experiencing what I would call the darkest of nights, the blackest night possible. You see, they had left everything to follow Jesus. When Jesus talks to them in the upper room on that last night, he tells them that he's not going to leave them as orphans. I think it's important to understand that Jesus had to give them that reassurance because the atmosphere in that room that night must have been this gray cloud, this black cloud that had settled over them. You see, they had heard Jesus talk about his death, but that night with the political situation and the climate in Jerusalem, the opposition that was becoming more and more public, more and more evident against Jesus, I think that night before the cross in that upper room as they celebrated the Passover meal, I think that was the first time the disciples actually began to understand. He's talking about dying, actual physical death. This is not a metaphor. This is not an illustration. He's not making an analogy. He's talking about dying. He's going to leave us. You see, they'd left everything. They'd left their families. They'd left their businesses. They had given up everything to follow Jesus, and here, barely 3 years into this adventure that they thought would be the adventure of a lifetime, it's all coming crashing down. When Peter got to the tomb that morning and saw that it was empty, for him, it had to just feel like insult added to injury. I mean, it's not enough that they took him, that they killed him, they abused him, hung him on a cross, put him in a tomb. Now they won't even let him rest in peace. Well, the two men did what men typically do. I've called this private distress because in a very manly response, they walked back. There's no public display of emotion. John thought he knew something, but he wasn't confident enough yet to share it, and he doesn't even mention the possibility. Peter and the others are thoroughly disappointed, and so, like men, they find a separate place and they grieve to themselves. But then there's personal despair. Mary grieved in a very different way. It says in this passage, Mary stood outside facing the tomb crying. That word in Greek, crying, sometimes it's translated weeping. It means ugly crying. It's a word that describes the kind of loud wailing that you sometimes see in the depth of grief when someone is grieving so severely, so deeply that it just sort of bubbles up an almost primal cry that comes out. She was beside herself. She was upset because of what she termed the burial disrespect. In the Jewish faith, it was crucial that burial take place with all the appropriate preparations, that it be left undisturbed. They had very strong cultural attitudes about burial. And here, adding insult to injury, they couldn't even leave the body alone. She assumed the worst. Somebody has vandalized this grave. Somebody has taken this body. His enemies have taken it. Who knows what horrible things they're going to do to it. And it was just more than she could bear. She'd just had a weekend of black nights. She just, her life was crashing down around her. And this was just a bridge too far. And she's just wailing. It's interesting. In that kind of utter despair, she bends down to just look in hopelessness into the tomb. And it says she saw two angels in white sitting there. Now this is interesting because they start a conversation with her. One of the angels was sitting at the head of where the body had been resting, and the other was at the feet. And they said, "Woman, why are you crying?" Now, I'm not really, I'm not swayed necessarily by the obsession that I find sometimes with people about angels. I think angels are fascinating, but I don't have little angel figurines in my house. I'm not an angel connoisseur. But I'm pretty sure if I saw an angel, I would take notice. I would be a little bit caught off guard, and I would want to talk to the angel. Mary is so consumed in her despair that she sees two angels dressed in white. That seems to imply an almost kind of shining, gleaming quality to them. And it doesn't even faze her. She doesn't care about angels. She's not interested. She has no curiosity. She knows nothing except Jesus is gone. That's the only thing that matters to her in her life. She's not deterred from her grief at all by the presence of two bright, shining angels, unimpressed by the sight of them. They say, "Who are you looking for?" She says, I'm crying because they've taken away my Lord and I don't know where they've put him. And she turned around. She's not even interested in the angels. She turns around to leave. And there's a man standing there. She wasn't aware of him walking up. That was not to be unexpected, as caught up as she was in her grief, as her eyes clouded by tears and despair. This is when the blackest of nights begins to see the bursting of the dawn. Now, use your sanctified imagination. Put yourself in that cemetery and see if we can't imagine how this unfolded. It starts with she turns and she sees just the shape of a man. Now, I've had people ask me, how is it possible that she didn't recognize Jesus? Well, there's lots of ways. First of all, she's not looking for Jesus to be standing up and talking to her. All right, she's looking for a corpse. That's her expectation. Secondly, she's been crying that kind of ugly cry so much that almost certainly she's been wiping her eyes and her eyes are a little bit clouded. But then don't forget this. As a woman, she would have not been in the habit of making eye contact with men. So as she turned and saw a man standing there that she didn't know was there, as she's startled by that, she would have kept her head bowed and she would have talked to him like this, looking at the ground. She would not have had the audacity to make eye contact with him. Remember when Jesus in John chapter 4 visited at the well with the Samaritan woman that came out in the middle of the day to draw water? That whole conversation was a shocking interview because of her audacity as a single woman in that setting to talk to Jesus. That was shocking. Mary, much more bound by cultural expectations, she didn't look this person in the face. She would have had her conversation looking down. At best, she would have seen the bottom of his flowing robe. She assumed it was the gardener. Who else would be in a cemetery first thing in the morning on the day after the Sabbath? It's interesting. When he comes to her, she turns, she sees Jesus, and he says, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?" See, we already have an Easter egg, if you will. An Easter egg is a little hint in a movie or in a plot line of something that's going to unfold later on, that's going to open up later on. He doesn't ask her, "What are you looking for?" That would have been the normal question early in the morning at a cemetery. Did you lose something? Did you leave something here? What are you looking for? That's not what he asked her. He said, "Who are you looking for?" Supposing he was the gardener, that was the obvious conclusion that she would make. She said, "Sir, if you've removed him, tell me where you've put him, and I will take him away." And this is when the dawn breaks, because she still doesn't know who it is until he speaks her name. And Jesus said, "Mary." She'd heard him speak her name 100 times before. In fact, her devotion to the Lord meant that sound of that voice was imprinted in her mind. She knew it. In fact, I wonder if during the blackness of that weekend, if she hadn't heard it over and over again, she would have rehearsed the times that they had been together, the things that she had seen, the lessons that she had heard him teach. But most of all, she would have remembered those times when he looked at her to talk just to her, and he said, "Mary." She knew that sound. Man, is this not what Jesus told the disciples earlier, that the sheep always recognize the sound of their own shepherd? She knew his voice. He'd asked her who she was looking for, but there was something about that personal intimacy when he called her by name. He spoke her name, and it was Jesus. Now, John doesn't tell us what we learn in other accounts. She immediately fell down and grabbed onto him. I mean, she grabbed him like she was never going to let him go. And Jesus says, "Don't touch me. Don't cling to me." Now, that's a little bit of a weak translation, because we've often been taught that Jesus somehow was not yet in the right kind of body, and she couldn't touch him yet. He wasn't ready for human contact. That's not what was happening at all. Let me explain what's happening in this moment. She drops down and she grabs him, and she's going to hold on to him. Now, in her mind, here I'm using my sanctified imagination. In her mind, she had just seen, not too long before, the resuscitation of Lazarus. Lazarus had been dead in the grave for 4 days. Jesus went to the tomb. He called him out. Lazarus comes out. He's covered in the burial cloths, and he's pulling and tugging to be loosened from all of that. He was alive. She'd seen that. I think that she assumed this was a Lazarus-like event. This was a resuscitation. She had Jesus back. She didn't know how long it was going to last, and so she's going to hold on to him as long as she can. But Jesus wants her to understand this is not that. This is not a Lazarus event. This is something entirely different. This is something you've never seen before. Lazarus was brought back to life, but he would die physically again. That's not what this is. He says, "Don't cling to me." Really, it's not that he means don't put your hands on me. He means don't hold me in the way that you're holding me, as if she's assuming that this is the relationship that she used to have. This is what it was like last week, and she's holding Jesus. He wants her to understand this is different. Things are changed now. I have not yet ascended to the Father. Now, all kinds of weird teaching comes out of that passage. Well, Jesus hadn't gone to heaven yet, and he didn't have the right kind of body. Listen, there's no official ascension event recorded in the Gospel of John. John just doesn't include that part of the story. We see it in Luke. We see it in Matthew. Obviously, it's in the first chapter of Acts. In John leaves it with this idea of the fact that there is an ascension coming, but it's still 40 days away. Jesus is saying, don't hold me like things haven't changed. I haven't ascended yet. We have time. I need you to do something right now. There will be time for us to be together. When he said, I haven't ascended yet, he meant we're going to have 40 days together. I'm going to explain things to you. I'm going to unfold the rest of the story so that you fully understand what's happening. She's holding on to him because she sees the now. And Jesus says, don't do this. It's different. He's pointing her to the then. See, if we go back to that night before the cross in that upper room, when Jesus is with the disciples, he tells them in John chapter 14, he said, I'm going to send, the Father's going to send a helper to be in my place. I'm not going to leave you as orphans. In other words, Jesus says, I'm not going to leave you and you're just going to wander around without connectedness, without support. I'm not doing that to you. In fact, what's going to happen is when I go away, the Spirit is going to come. He's going to take up residence in your lives. And now the bond that you have, because you're all connected to me, you're now going to be connected to each other because I'm going to take up residence through my Spirit inside your life. That's what he's hinting at here with Mary. Don't hold me like this was last week. Everything is different now. This is Easter. This is resurrection. This is the conquest of death. We've got 40 days. I've got something for you to do. We'll have time. You'll see me again. Well, the recognition of the Lord that she had in that moment, she calls him Rabboni, or as one of our children said, Rabboni. She calls him Rabboni. Let me tell you why that is so odd. John goes out of his way to explain to the readers who might not understand the language that it means teacher. But here's what John doesn't explain. Rabboni was a very unusual title, and it was almost never used like the word rabbi. Rabbi does mean teacher, but rabbi was used for a human teacher. A spiritual teacher who would sit and teach God's word. That was a rabbi. When she calls him Rabboni, she is using a word that is only used in the Bible, I think. I didn't check every instance, but as far as I can see, it's only used in the Word of God to describe God as teacher. She doesn't understand everything that's unfolding here. But she does understand one thing perfectly. This Jesus, he's divine. He is the Son of God. When she calls him Rabboni, she's calling him teacher, but more than that, she's calling him the divine teacher. What an extraordinary confession, just off the cuff, that she gives here. An instant recognition of his deity. He's about to return to the Father. He tells her, don't hold on to me. She doesn't have complete understanding, but he's hinting that a new relationship is coming, and there will be time for them to be together. But right now, he wants her to report to the disciples. I love this. It says after he tells her, don't hold on to me. Things are different now. I need you to do something. He said, go to my brothers and tell them that I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. Now here's the thing. Tell them of the dawn that is breaking on this Easter Sunday morning. Even at the moment of her discovery, like Peter, who in the moment of the transfiguration, he sees Jesus and he sees Moses and Elijah, and Peter says, man, let's build some tents. Let's just camp right here and stay here. That was Mary's attitude. That's almost always our response when we have an incredible encounter with the Spirit of God. When God meets with us, when we have those moments and God is just excessively real to us, we just want to stay right there. We want to bask in that presence. That's what Mary wanted. She just wanted to stay right there. She would have stayed in that moment as long as Jesus would have allowed it. And yet he says, Mary, I have something for you. Even at this moment of your discovery, there's not time for you to just bask in this moment. I need you to take a charge from me. Go deliver the news. You know, that's the thing about Easter. God had to come to me and say, you know, you're fretting because normally there's 1,000 people on the Evergreen campus on Easter Sunday morning. I mean, it's hands down my favorite Sunday of the year. And yet, while I would love for us to be together, to bask in His presence, to enjoy each other's presence, while I yearn for that kind of Easter, Jesus says that on this Easter, it's more important that you become a messenger. That you don't settle into the joy of your salvation and think that just means the church being together and enjoying the connection that we have as family. But I want you to accept the challenge to tell other people. On this Easter, let the fact that we're not together remind us of the charge that out where we are right now, that's where we've been told to go. As you go, He's going to tell the disciples, take the good news of what you know about Jesus everywhere with you. Bring people to me. Make disciples. Baptize them. Teach them to observe everything that I've taught you. I console my emotions this morning by seeing all these empty chairs and reminding myself that these empty chairs could be filled with people. But Easter 2020, the people that could be in these chairs, they're on mission. They've been sent out to deliver good news. Mary, I know you want to stay here with me, but I need you to go and tell what you've discovered. You see, whether it was the preschoolers who showed us in their skit, whether it was the testimony of Mike Seagraves, everything you've seen this morning is a reminder that Easter is not about coming here so that we can celebrate together. That's part of it. The celebration is vital. But the heart of Easter is that we go because we know something that the rest of the world doesn't know. You see, that's where the blackest of nights becomes the brightest of days. She says in verse 18, Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples. Now, we already know a little bit about Mary. We know from the word used about her grief that she was an emotional woman, that she was not afraid to sort of wear her emotions on her sleeve. She had that ugly cry at the tomb, so we can only estimate that she didn't go and say, hey, I'm supposed to tell you guys something. That's not the way this went. She arrives where the disciples are, and she announced, "I have seen the Lord." What? I've seen him. Yeah, I saw him. I got to talk to him. He called me by name. I've seen the Lord. And she told them what he'd said to her. Tell my brothers that I'm going to meet with them. I'm coming to be in their presence. Let them know he's coming here. Get ready. There's no more black cloth hanging all over the windows. There's no coverings on the mirrors. We've got to do away with all the signs of grief and mourning. Do away with them because he's coming. I saw him. I saw the Lord. It's Easter, and this day changes everything. We're separate. But let me tell you something. We look back today at a resurrection that changed everything, and we look forward to a day, I think, not too far down the road. We need to put away despair. We need to put away laziness. We need to put away loneliness. We need to get on with the task of sharing what we know about that day, that resurrection day that changed everything, because guess what? The message for us is that he's coming back to us. He's going to be here. It's going to be any time. And we've got to be ready. We've got to be prepared. We've got to get the place ready for his arrival. Everything that she dreamed about was accomplished better than she could ever have hoped. He's alive. And 2,000 years later, he's not only still alive, but he's coming back. I received a story today, this morning early. I don't know how widely it's been circulated, but I think you'll recognize the nod to Dr. Seuss. It's entitled, How the Virus Stole Easter. I just want to end this morning with this story. 'Twas late in 19 when the virus began, bringing chaos and fear to all people, each land. People were sick, hospitals full, doctors overwhelmed, no one in school. As winter gave way to the promise of spring, the virus raged on, touching peasant and king. People hid in their homes from the enemy unseen. They YouTubed and Zoomed, social distanced and cleaned. April approached and churches were closed. There won't be an Easter, the world this year supposed. There won't be church services and egg hunts are out. No reason for new dresses when we can't go about. Holy Week started as bleak as the rest. The world was focused on masks and on tests. Easter can't happen this year, it proclaimed. Online and at home, it just won't be the same. Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, the days came and went. The virus pressed on, it just would not relent. The world woke Sunday and nothing had changed. The virus still menaced, the people estranged. Pooh-pooh to the saints, the world was grumbling. They're finding out now that no Easter is coming. They're just waking up. We know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two, and then all the saints will all cry boo-hoo. That noise, said the world, will be something to hear. So it paused, and the world put a hand to its ear. And it did hear a sound coming through all the skies. It started down low, and it started to rise. But the sound wasn't depressed. Why, this sound was triumphant. It couldn't be so, but it grew with abundance. The world stared around, popping its eyes. Then it shook when it saw a shocking surprise. Every saint in every nation, the tall and the small, was celebrating Jesus in spite of it all. It hadn't stopped Easter from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the world, with its life quite stuck in quarantine, stood puzzling and puzzling. Just how can it be? It came without bonnets. It came without bunnies. It came without egg hunts, cantatas, or monies. Then the world thought of something it hadn't before. Maybe Easter, it thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Easter, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, the story's not done. What will you do? Will you share with that one or two or more people needing hope in this night? Will you share the source of your life in this fight? The churches are empty, but so is the tomb. And Jesus is victor over death, doom, and gloom. So this year at Easter, let this be our prayer. As the virus still rages all around everywhere, may the world see hope when it looks at God's people. May the world see the church, not a building or steeple. May the world find faith in Jesus' death and resurrection. May the world find joy in a time of dejection. May 2020 be known as the year of survival, but not only that, let it start a revival. If you need to know Jesus Christ, you contact the pastors. You speak to somebody in the group where you are right now. We will share with you why Easter changed everything, including our lives. Come, find Jesus. He is risen. And then go. Tell others about Jesus because He is coming. He is risen. He is risen indeed. God bless you, a people called Evergreen.
On behalf of Evergreen Church, I want to welcome you to our live stream this morning. We are so excited that you've chosen to join us today. If you'd like to get connected to our community, or if you're new to Evergreen, I want to encourage you to join us on our website, evergreenbc.org. You can also find us on social media by searching for evergreen.tulsa. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter. If you've made a decision this morning and you'd like to speak to one of our pastors, you can easily connect to our staff through our website by searching through the messaging function. We are so excited that you've chosen to join us here today. We want to encourage you to come back again and see us when we open soon. Thank you and God bless.
Jesus is risen. You crushed the power of hell.